The rain poured heavily against the window, each drop shattering on the glass like a reflection of the chaos inside Ethan Caldwell's mind. Inside his luxurious Manhattan penthouse, the tension was suffocating. On the expensive walnut desk, a divorce file lay neatly, waiting for his signature. Beside it was a pregnancy test, two bright red lines glaring at him like an accusation. Ava Sinclair stood before him, her eyes swollen and red, yet filled with unwavering determination. She was no longer the woman who silently endured his broken promises, who patiently waited for him while he drowned himself in work. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. Ethan clenched his fists, but his expression remained cold and distant as always. "So what?" His voice was so low it was barely audible. Ava froze, disbelief washing over her like a tidal wave. "So what?" she repeated, struggling to keep her voice from shaking. "Ethan, this is our child. A baby." Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then exhaled. But instead of showing emotion, instead of reaching for her, he let out a bitter laugh. "You think a baby can fix this marriage?" His words struck her like a dagger. Ava couldn't believe it. This was the man she had spent 6 years loving, waiting for, sacrificing everything for. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, I don't need you to stay out of responsibility. I just wanted you to know you have a child, and I want you to choose." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Choose?" he scoffed. "Ava, I made my choice a long time ago." Then, right in front of her, he ripped the pregnancy test apart, letting the broken pieces fall to the floor. As if the baby never existed, as if their child meant nothing to him. Ava stood there, frozen, her hands clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. This was Ethan. This was who he truly was. He didn't want a family. He didn't want her. And she couldn't keep begging for love from a man who no longer had a heart. She swallowed her sobs, took a deep breath, and straightened her spine. Then, "I won't bother you anymore." Ava picked up the pen, signing the divorce papers with a strength she didn't know she had. Ethan watched her, but there wasn't a hint of hesitation in his gaze. He took the pen, signed the documents as if it were just another business deal, without emotion. When he was done, he pushed the papers toward her, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door without a backward glance. The door slammed shut behind him. Ava stood alone in the empty apartment, feeling as if her entire world had collapsed. She placed a hand over her stomach and whispered to her unborn child, "My love, from now on, it's just you and me." She had lost Ethan, but she would never lose this child, and she swore that her son would never know the heartless man that was Ethan Caldwell. 6 years passed like a fleeting breeze. Ava Sinclair was no longer the fragile woman she once was. From a woman abandoned with a shattered heart, she had rebuilt herself, creating a new life from the ground up. She had moved to a small coastal town, far from the dazzling lights of New York, where memories of Ethan had faded into nothing more than a distant nightmare. Most importantly, she had become a mother, and that boy, Liam Sinclair, was her entire world. He had deep, ocean blue eyes, eyes that were identical to Ethan's. But beyond that, Liam bore no resemblance to the man who had cast them aside. The boy had a warm smile, a kind soul, and above all, an unconditional love for his mother. Ava had kept everything about Ethan a secret. She never mentioned him, never showed Liam a single photo of him. To Liam, his father never existed, and Ava believed that was for the best. She was convinced she had buried her past completely, that Ethan Caldwell would remain nothing more than a ghost in her memory. But fate has its own way of turning lives upside down. In New York, Ethan Caldwell stepped into the headquarters of Caldwell Industries, the empire he commanded as CEO. In the past 6 years, he had achieved everything he once dreamed of. He had expanded the company, doubled its profits, and built relationships with some of the most powerful figures in the world. He had everything, but inside, there was always a void he could never fill. He never spoke of it, but there were nights he would wake up from a restless sleep, his hand instinctively reaching for the other side of the bed, only to realize no one was there. He once believed he could forget Ava, that love was secondary, and his career was all that mattered. But every time he saw a happy little family on the street, every time he accidentally heard a song that once belonged to them, a nameless emptiness would settle deep within him. And then, on a morning like any other, An email appeared on his computer screen. A routine internal report from the company's legal department. At first, it seemed like just another document. But as Ethan skimmed through a list of names related to an ongoing financial dispute, his eyes froze. Ava Sinclair. His fingers trembled slightly as he clicked on the file. Legal representative, Liam Sinclair. The room around him seemed to spin. Liam? A boy carrying Ava's last name? No. It couldn't be. His grip on the mouse tightened, his knuckles turning white. A strange sensation crept into his chest. Suspicion, confusion, and a fear he had never known before. Ethan shot up from his chair. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to find them. A fated reunion. 3 days later, in a quiet coastal town, Ava held Liam's hand as they stepped out of a small grocery store. "Do you like these cookies, Liam?" she asked, glancing down at her son. Liam nodded eagerly, his blue eyes lighting up. "Yes, Mom. Thank you." Ava smiled, until it vanished in an instant. She felt it before she saw it. A presence. A familiar gaze. Someone was watching her from across the street. She turned sharply, and her heart nearly stopped. Ethan. He stood there, amidst the bustling crowd, tall and powerful. Yet his face was etched with shock and pain. Because he had seen Liam. Because he had recognized the truth. The 6-year-old boy with the same piercing blue eyes. The same sharp features. It was unmistakable. This was his son. Ava felt like her entire world was crumbling around her. Before she could react, Ethan had crossed the street and stood directly in front of her. "Ava," his voice was hoarse, his eyes locked onto Liam as if the entire world had just shifted beneath him. Instinctively, Ava pulled Liam closer, shielding him from the man she had sworn her son would never know. "You have no right to be here," she whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan looked at her, then at Liam. "The boy, he's mine, isn't he?" Ava wanted to lie. She wanted to deny it all. To say this was just a misunderstanding, that Liam had nothing to do with him. But she couldn't, because the truth was too obvious. Her silence was all the answer Ethan needed. He took a step back, inhaling sharply as if he had just been struck. 6 years. For 6 years, he had a son and he never knew. And Ava had deliberately kept it from him. A storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, pain, flashed through Ethan's eyes. "Why?" he whispered, his voice laced with hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ava clenched her fists, her heart pounding. "Because you tore this family apart." Her words were like a blade slicing through him. Ava turned, gripping Liam's hand. "Come on, sweetheart," she said gently. But before she could take a step, Ethan's strong hand gripped her wrist. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. "This isn't over, Ava." And in that moment, she knew their lives would never be the same again. Ethan wasn't letting go. His grip on her wrist was firm, his gaze dark with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. For 6 years, she had kept the most important thing in his life from him, his son. Ava yanked her wrist free, her voice cold. "You have no right to interfere in my life or Liam's." Ethan let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "No right," he repeated, his tone dangerously soft. "You stole 6 years from me. 6 years where I didn't even know I had a son. And now you tell me I have no right." Ava's fists clenched. "You're the one who destroyed this family, Ethan. You chose work over me. You tore up the pregnancy test right in front of me." Ethan stilled. The memory hit him like a freight train. That day, after signing the divorce papers, he had walked away without looking back. He had shredded the pregnancy test Ava had handed him, thinking it was just another desperate attempt to hold on to a marriage that had already crumbled. But the truth was, she had really been pregnant. He had destroyed his chance to be a father from the very beginning. A sharp pain twisted in his chest. His eyes flickered to Liam, his son. The 6-year-old with the same blue eyes as him, but filled with innocence and warmth, completely unaware of the battle raging between the adults standing before him. Ethan wasn't going to lose his child again. He took a deep breath, his voice firm. "I want to be in his life." Ava tightened her grip on Liam. "No." Ethan stepped closer, his voice cold. "Ava, do you really think you can keep him from me forever? We can settle this in court if you want." Ava froze. She knew that with Ethan's power and wealth, if he took legal action, she could lose everything. No, she couldn't let that happen. "Ethan," she said, her voice lower, trying to remain calm. You don't understand. I didn't keep him from you to hurt you. I did it because I know who you are. You always put work before everything. You can't give Liam a stable, loving home. Ethan's expression hardened. I am not the same man I was, Ava, she scoffed. People like you don't change. But Ethan didn't waver. His voice dropped to a whisper, full of conviction. Then let me prove you wrong. Ava held his gaze, conflicted, because deep down, she feared that if Ethan truly tried, she might actually believe him. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then took a deep breath. Then let me prove you wrong. Ava didn't trust Ethan, but she knew she couldn't avoid him forever. So she set one condition. Ethan had to spend real time with Liam. No assistance. No work. No phone. Just him and their son. Ava thought Ethan would give up after a few days. But she was wrong. Ethan showed up every morning. He took Liam to school, learned how to make his lunch, and even sat through animated movies he had never cared about before. He listened to every one of Liam's innocent stories, played games he had never imagined himself enjoying, and for the first time, he truly lived outside of his corporate empire. And the scariest part? Liam adored Ethan immediately. The boy knew nothing of the past. He only knew he had found a father who was willing to play soccer with him all afternoon, who patiently answered all his curious questions about the world. Ava watched from a distance, her heart conflicted. She couldn't deny that Ethan had changed. But how long could he keep it up? A crossroads moment. 1 month later, Caldwell Industries faced a major financial crisis. The board demanded that Ethan return to New York immediately to handle the situation. If he didn't, he could lose everything. Both Ava and Ethan knew this was a defining moment. Would he fall back into his old ways? Would he choose his career over his family once again? Ethan looked at his son sleeping peacefully in his room, then turned back to Ava. He took a deep breath. I'm not going anywhere. Ava's eyes widened. What? Ethan smiled gently. I've already lost 6 years. I won't lose another second. Tears welled up in Ava's eyes. She had always believed that Ethan would never choose family over work. But this time he did. This time he stayed. A new beginning. A few months later, Ethan stepped down as CEO of Caldwell Industries. He started a smaller company where he could work remotely, ensuring he had time for Liam. Ava finally believed that Ethan deserved a place in their son's life. And one evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Ethan reached for Ava's hand, looking deep into her eyes. Ava, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. But this time, I won't let that happen again. Ava's heart pounded. Ethan slowly knelt down. Will you marry me again? Tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't need to think. She nodded. This time, they were starting over. Not because of the love they once had, but because their family was finally whole. Lessons from their story. Money cannot replace family. Ethan had everything. Yet he still felt empty without the people who truly mattered. Love is not about words but actions. Ava couldn't be convinced by promises. Ethan had to prove he had truly changed. It's never too late to make things right. Even after 6 lost years, Ethan reclaimed his family with sincerity and effort. A happy family is not about perfection but commitment. Ava learned that love doesn't need to be perfect, only that both people are willing to fight for it. If you were Ava, would you forgive Ethan? If you were Ethan, how would you make amends? Have you ever had to choose between love and career? Share your thoughts in the comments.